Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is gonna be a video about how to build your first beginner lists, what to look for in the list, what you should definitely bring, what you maybe want to reconsider, just to help the beginner player out a little bit and in getting to the table for the first couple of times. So it is quite challenging with a lot of different entries across the books. Um, Generally, if you build a list, you can go for two types of lists, and that's either balanced or skewed. Skewed lists are lists that focus heavily on one particular aspect of the game or one particular aspect of the army. So in a balanced list, you can expect to find a bit of magic, a bit of combat, a bit of ranged damage output, and that all works together to give you the good results that you're looking for. And usually, people say that very good players can take really the biggest advantage out of balanced lists. I think that's maybe kind of true because you know a bit what counter works against what unit of your enemy army, and you can always adapt in your matchups, turning pieces that are quite valuable against some particular army into the lesser valuable pieces against another opponent. Then scoot lists is the other alternative. These lists are a bit more matchup dependent generally. So you're looking, for example, at a gun line, at an armor skew where everything has a lot of armor in your list, at an aggro combat list that you just push forward and then you just hope to see what happens, and the monster mash list where you have a lot of single models, not necessarily monsters even in my view, but just a lot of single models that you try to use to combo charge and then break the enemy by just killing a lot of his troops. Um, yeah, so I would advise for a beginning player to go for a balanced list. Also, mostly because then you learn about all of the different aspects of the game. If you're gonna go in a tournament, it might actually be a good idea to go for a skewed list instead, or a skewed list, because then you don't have to spend as much time on every single phase of the game, and you can keep a bit better within the time limit. So, for example, if you play a gun line, then the deployment is really important. But then again, your movement phase is going to be quite quick, um, and you just have to shoot. And if you go for an aggro combat list, you can just push it forward, see what happens, and then afterwards talk to your opponent about why it might not have worked as well as you had hoped. Um, yeah, so for balanced lists, must-haves, I would say, is the following kind of setup. So you have a combat general. Alternatively, you have a combat wizard. However, I would say that splitting out the general duty and the wizard duty, magic duty, is even easier. So you have a combat general, you have a BSB, which is a battle standard bearer, which allows you to reroll discipline checks within a 12-inch bubble. Then you have some magic support, probably in the form of a wizard coming out of your character section. You have 3 to 4 solid combat threats within your list. You have some ranged threats, you have some chaff pieces, and some support pieces. So, chaff pieces here are units that you can recognize by the names light troops or the rules light troops and with high movement, and they are inexpensive. So, quite a lot of examples are to be found across all the different books. It goes from direwolves from the Vampire Covenant to their great bats. Eve Riders from the Sylvan Elves, um, Warriors of the Dark Gods, Chimeras, or even the single Wretched one. I'm really a big fan of that. Vengeance Seekers and the Dwarfs. Just even also an Artificer on a horse for Empire of Sonsdal can also work like that. Um, it's a lot of different choices there. Basically, it's anything between 100 and 200 points that has light troops and high movement, or that has reasonable movement, but still quite good maneuverability, such as Warriors of the Dark Gods Fallen, with a 12-inch march range, but also with light troops. Um, yeah, so this combat general is something that's nice to have because you can turn around a matchup between two combat units with him. BSB is just nice for your reroll on discipline. At, in a balanced list, you will really start to notice when you don't take a BSB because you don't really rely on one aspect of your army. So your opponent is also going to try to counter the thing that is going to be the most harmful to him or her, and then that is going to result in quite a lot of panic checks normally. And for that, you do need a BSB. Yeah, the wizard magic. I would say as a beginner, just try to just play with a bit of magic, see if you like it, and then probably you'll like it because a lot of us like it. There's not a lot of players that don't play with any magic, so it's anyway good to learn. And then for the rest, you have 4 combat threats. I think that's the sweet spot because you have some lists where people play only 3 combat threats, either because the blocks are quite expensive or because there's other very juicy stuff that you can also take. But having like 4 units of, I don't know, 30 orcs is quite decent, and you'll often find that if you have 4 blocks and the opponent only has 3 blocks, then you're 1 block ahead. So if you go just for a one-on-one engagement, then you will likely win out unless the support of the opponent is able to take out one of your combat blocks below any threat. So these support pieces, they can be ranged threats or they can also be combat threats. So chariots fall in this category. Also war machine, most war machines fall in this category. And then with the war machines are a bit of a well, it's a nice category to complete your list because most war machines are quite specific in what kind of troop that they counter. Like a catapult is really good against infantry, a cannon is really good against single models, and a Empire of Sun style rocketeer, yeah, rocket battery is also quite good at single models, but then at the bit smaller ones, something like ogres, it's also quite decent against. And something like a volley gun or a vermin swarm volley gun, rotary gun. Those are kind of like general purpose tools, so they're worse at specific counters, but then they're quite good against everything, like reasonably good against everything. So if you're uncomfortable about choosing what you want to go for something like a volley gun, because it will help you in any scenario. Then the last item I wrote down for today is how to build your core. So I mentioned before that you want to have like 3 to 4 combat blocks. I would advise to get at least 1 combat block from your core because core is a big part of your army, like 25% in most cases. If you don't take any combat blocks from your core, then you're gonna fill your core with other stuff that is not gonna be as good as the other stuff from other categories. Well, that was a long sentence, but what I mean is that if you basically you can get away with just having 1 or 2, well, 2 of your combat blocks being from core and not suffering too much from the fact that they might not be as strong as the same blocks, but then from special slots by spicing them up with a character or by investing your magic in them. However, your chaff pieces and your support pieces, usually the ones that come from core, are not as good as the other ones, and there the difference is quite big usually. Like for example, the beast herds, razor tusk chariots, raiding chariots from core. They only have D6 impact hits. They have quite a short charge range for a chariot. They're only resilience 4. Um, there's a lot of downsides on these things, especially also the fact that they have quite a big footprint and quite a low advance rate. So that is one example where the core version is definitely worse than the special version because in special you can also get some tools that have a similar advance, so a similar threat range for the charge, but hit way harder from the frontage that they have. So in that sense, it makes way more sense to take something from under a different category rather than from core. So I would say that definitely try to get your combat blocks from core, or at least one, preferably two, and then you'll be golden. Otherwise, core chaff is quite valuable. You have the points anyway that you have to spend in core. Chaff is something that makes the game easier. You don't always need chaff, but it does make the game quite a lot easier. And if you can spend your core points on them, then you can use your points useful in different ways elsewhere. So then that is also what makes Bat Swarms and Vampire Covenant quite okay. The Reaver cavalry, whatever, from the Highborn Elves, the core cavalry that has light troops. As a Dread Elf player, I'm really jealous of having a unit of 5 cavalry models in core with light troops and faint flight, because the Dread Elf variant where you have to spend like 210 points in order to get a unit in core, with light troops and Vanguard and faint flight, that is quite expensive. Also, I would say as a final note, stay close to the minimum requirement of core, unless you're building a scout list like 300 Dread Elf Legionnaires. Then it might be worth it. But yeah, just for your first army, just don't overspend on core and just take some nice other stuff with you. I hope this was helpful to a lot of beginners out there. And as always, I'll see you the next time.